When I walked into the bridal shop that morning, I expected tears of joy. Instead, my daughter looked me in the eye and said, "Oh, I didn't invite you to the fitting, Mom. It's my day, not yours." The words hit me like a bucket of ice water down my spine. I froze. The shop smelled like fresh silk and perfume, but suddenly it felt sterile, like the air had been vacuumed out. I had come to surprise her, to share in the excitement. After all, I'd paid for nearly everything, $12, $400 to be exact, down to the last receipt. $4,000 for the venue deposit. $3,200 for catering. $2,800 for her fiancé's car repair 2 months ago, just until we get back on our feet, Mom. $1,500 for the photographer. $900 for the invitations. I had told myself it was love. That's what mothers do, right? But standing there, watching her avert her eyes, it felt less like love and more like a withdrawal from a bank account that was my soul. Then I saw it. The dress. Hanging there in the mirror's reflection like a ghost from another life. My dress. The same ivory lace sleeves. The same pearl buttons down the back. Even the tiny repaired tear under the waistline hidden, unless you knew where to look. I whispered, "That's my dress." My daughter didn't flinch. She smiled faintly. "Oh yeah," she said, adjusting the bodice. "Grandma gave it to me. It was in your old chest." She said it like she was talking about an extra coat, not the one thing I'd kept after my husband died. That dress was the only thing I had from the day I believed in forever. I wanted to scream, to ask how my late mother-in-law even had it, but all I managed was a whisper. "Sweetheart, that's mine. From my wedding." She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Well, it looks better on me." That was the moment. The crack. The split down the middle of my chest where something sacred used to live. For years, I'd convinced myself my daughter was just ambitious. That's what I told my friends when she called only for money. "Mom, can you send $300 for my exam fees?" "Mom, my rent's short again, $9.50 this time. Promise it's the last." "Mom, he lost his job. Can you help with the deposit?" "It's only $2,200. Each request came with sweetness. Compliments about how strong and amazing I was. She'd call me her special woman, her rock. Those words were like sugar-coating poison. By my last calculation, I'd sent her over $46,000 in 5 years, a number I could barely say out loud without choking. Every transfer had a story. A tearful voice. A promise of, "I'll pay you back when things get better." They never got better. Only quieter. That night, I sat in my car in the parking lot, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. My chest trembled like I'd swallowed a live wire. I could hear my pulse in my ears. I kept replaying her words, "It looks better on me." I had worked 2 jobs after her father died. Cleaned houses in the morning and answered phones at night. Every time I thought I'd saved enough for a trip or a new dress, there came another call. "Mom, I just need a little help." It wasn't just money, it was time, energy, trust. I'd built her life brick by brick, thinking one day she'd invite me in. Instead, she built walls. That evening she called. Her voice was cheerful, casual, rehearsed. "Mom, can you transfer $1,200 for the florist? They're asking for it today." I stared at my phone. Something in me snapped. For the first time in years, I didn't say yes. I said, "No, sweetheart. I can't do that." She went silent. Then, "Wow. After everything I've done for you." I laughed. A bitter, broken laugh that surprised me. "Everything you've done for me?" I said softly. "Tell me, what have you done for me, darling?" There was a long pause. Then the line went dead. I sat there in the dark, phone still glowing, my reflection in the glass older, smaller, but suddenly awake. Something was shifting. And when the screen blinked off, it was like a curtain had dropped on a play I didn't realize I'd been starring in for years. For the first time in my life, I whispered out loud, "I'm done being the ATM with feelings." The next morning, I woke up and didn't cry. That was new. I just sat at the edge of my bed, feeling the sunlight hit my face like a question. What now? For years, my first thought every morning was what my daughter needed. Rent. Tuition. Car repairs. Something. But that morning, for the first time, my mind was quiet. Then my phone buzzed, her name lighting up the screen like an alarm. Answer. I didn't. 5 minutes later, another message. If you're going to be petty about money, maybe you shouldn't come to the wedding. That word petty burned. After everything, she called me petty? It was like being stabbed with the very knife I'd used to cut her birthday cakes. I made coffee black, bitter, the way I used to drink it when I worked night shifts. And I started writing. Not a letter. Not a note. But a list. Every dollar I'd ever given her. Every deposit, every emergency. It took 3 hours and 2 cups of coffee to total it all up. $62,340. That's how much my love had cost. I stared at the number until it blurred. My heart hurt, not from the money, but from the realization that I'd bought silence, not gratitude. That was when I made my first real decision in years. I went to the bank. The woman at the counter was young, maybe my daughter's age. Her name tag said Clara. I handed her my ID and said, I'd like to separate my accounts. One personal, one private. She looked up cautious. Is everything okay, ma'am? I smiled. No, but it will be. Clara guided me through opening a new account, one that my daughter didn't know existed. She even helped me set up a new PIN, new debit card, new alerts. When she asked for a security question, I paused. Then I said, what's one thing I'll never be again? She looked confused. I answered, used. For the first time in months, I felt air in my lungs. 3 days later, there was a knock at my door. I looked through the peephole and saw her. My daughter. Red-faced, manicured nails tapping against the frame like bullets. I opened the door halfway. She pushed it open the rest of the way. Why haven't you sent the money? She demanded. Do you want people to think you're broke? There it was again, the manipulation wrapped in pride. I said quietly, I'm not broke. I'm just done paying for people who treat me like I am. Her tone softened instantly, crocodile tears in her eyes. Mom, please. You know how stressed I am. You're my only support. I had heard those same lines too many times to count. So I said the thing that changed everything. Then maybe it's time you learn to stand on your own feet. Her face twisted. You're unbelievable. After Dad died, I thought you'd want to help. Guess I was wrong. I closed the door. Gently. Not out of anger, but out of peace. Behind it, I heard her shouting, you'll regret this. I whispered back to no one, no, sweetheart. I already regretted everything before this. A week later, I got a call from an old friend, Margie, my former coworker from the insurance office. I saw something weird, she said. You might want to sit down. Apparently, my daughter had been telling people, our old friends, that I was losing my mind. That I'd been mismanaging funds and forgetting things. She'd even mentioned maybe filing for power of attorney just to help Mom out. That phrase hit me like a punch. Power of attorney. She wasn't just taking my money, she was planning to take my control. That night, I went through my mail, my accounts, my passwords. I found she'd been forwarding copies of my bank statements to her fiancé's email. She had my old login saved. It wasn't a mistake. It was strategy. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just emotional manipulation, it was financial abuse. The next morning, I walked into Langford and Associates, a law office downtown that smelled like coffee and printer ink. The receptionist smiled politely. Do you have an appointment? No, I said, but I have a story. An older lawyer named Mr. Langford came out. He listened. Quietly. Didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he leaned forward and said, Mrs. Parker, what your daughter's doing fits the legal definition of coercive control and financial exploitation. He helped me draw up a protection order, lock my accounts, and prepare documents to revoke any access she might claim. When he handed me a folder labeled Personal Authority Restoration, I almost laughed. Authority restoration, I said. I like the sound of that. He smiled. So do I. You'd be surprised how many mothers sit where you are thinking they're alone. For the first time, I didn't feel crazy. I felt seen. That weekend, I went to lunch with Margie and another friend, Teresa. When I told them what happened, they shared their own stories, grown children using guilt and money as weapons. We laughed, cried, compared notes. Teresa said, "You know what I did? Changed my locks." Margie nodded. "And blocked every number that made me shake." That night, I did both. Changed the locks. Blocked her number. Then poured myself a glass of wine, not out of celebration, but liberation. I looked at my reflection in the window and whispered, "You're getting your life back, piece by piece." The next morning, I went to a salon. The same one I used to take my daughter to before prom. The stylist asked what I wanted. I said, "A haircut that doesn't look like I'm waiting for permission." She smiled. "I know exactly what you mean." When she spun me around to face the mirror, I barely recognized the woman looking back. Shoulders straighter. Eyes clearer. She wasn't the woman begging for a call back. She was someone learning that silence could be peace, not punishment. That night, my phone buzzed again, but this time, it wasn't my daughter. It was an unknown number. The message read, "Mrs. Parker, this is Detective Hayes. We need to discuss a claim filed against you for elder neglect and fraud." My blood ran cold. Fraud? Neglect? It was starting. I sat there, phone trembling in my hand, realizing my daughter wasn't done fighting, and neither was I. The next morning, the detective's call replayed in my head like an echo I couldn't silence. Fraud. Neglect. Words I'd only ever heard on television, and now they were pinned to my name. The message said my daughter had filed a report claiming I'd misused family funds and was mentally unfit. I remember setting down my cup of coffee so hard it cracked. The cup cost $3. My dignity had cost $62,000. I wasn't losing either again. Detective Hayes met me at the station. He was polite but guarded. "Mrs. Parker, your daughter alleges you've been withdrawing large sums and hiding assets." I handed him a folder, neatly labeled, tabbed, color-coded by month. Receipts. Transfers. Screenshots. Every $300 exam fee. Every $950 rent payment. Every $2,200 emergency. He flipped through the stack and exhaled. "You've documented everything." I nodded. "When love becomes accounting, you start keeping ledgers." He smiled, almost sadly. "I'll include this in the report. It's clear you're competent." For the first time, the word competent sounded like a medal. A week later, a thick envelope arrived: civil hearing, petition for financial guardianship. My daughter wanted legal control of my money. My lawyer, Mr. Langford, read it, his jaw tightening. "She's claiming diminished capacity." "We'll fight it." "Will it get ugly?" I asked. He looked up. "Mrs. Parker, it already is." The courthouse smelled of old paper and nerves. I wore navy blue, steady, unthreatening. My daughter sat across the aisle, flawless in white, tears at the ready. When the judge entered, she began her story. "My poor mother's confused. She's been sending money to strangers. She's paranoid." Every sentence felt like sandpaper. Then Langford stood. "Your Honor, Exhibit A." He projected bank records, my transfers, her withdrawals, each labeled gift. He turned to her fiancé on the witness stand. "Mr. Keller, can you explain why you were withdrawing from Mrs. Parker's account using her password?" He stammered. "She gave us permission." "Langford, do you have that in writing?" Silence. The judge's pen stopped moving. That silence was the first crack in their wall. The next day they came armed with something new, a forged letter from me, claiming I wanted her to manage my estate. But the date was wrong. The signature misspelled my middle name. Langford slid the paper across the table. "Your Honor, this is amateur forgery." The judge raised an eyebrow. "And you can prove that?" Langford nodded. "Forensic handwriting expert on our side." When the expert testified, explaining stroke pressure and ink analysis, I felt the room tilt. For once, the truth wasn't fragile, it was scientific. 3 on each side. Her side. Her fiancé, red-faced. A friend who repeated rehearsed lines about my forgetfulness. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly concerned. Mine. Margie, calm and fierce, reading my texts aloud. Detective Hayes, confirming no fraud found. My family doctor, Dr. Singh, who said plainly, she's perfectly capable, just finally setting boundaries. When he said that, I saw a few jurors smile. Boundaries sounded noble in that cold room. Langford approached my daughter. Ms. Keller, you testified your mother is confused, correct? Yes. And yet you relied on her to pay for your venue, your car, your living expenses? Yes, but... He leaned in. So she was competent enough to fund your lifestyle, but not competent enough to keep her own? The courtroom went still. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to hum louder. Her face flushed. She's twisting things. She said she'd help. Langford didn't blink. Did she say forever? Silence. The judge cleared her throat. Answer the question. My daughter looked down. No. That single word was my freedom bell. As the gavel echoed for recess, my daughter turned toward me. Her mask cracked. You think you've won? Without me, you'll die alone. I felt something, pity, not anger. I'd rather be alone than owned, I said. That was my mic drop moment. On the final day, the judge asked if I wanted to make a statement. I stood. My legs trembled, but my voice didn't. Your Honor, I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because I taught my daughter that love means giving everything. And she learned that too well. I'm here to teach both of us a new lesson: love also means saying no. Every word landed like truth finally getting oxygen. When I sat down, Langford whispered, "That's how you win a case, Mrs. Parker, by telling the truth better than they tell lies." The judge's voice was steady. Petition denied. Full financial authority remains with Mrs. Parker. Additionally, the court finds evidence of attempted financial exploitation. Restitution is advised. I didn't hear the rest. My heartbeat drowned it out. Justice didn't roar, it exhaled. Outside, cameras flashed, local reporters sniffing for drama. One asked, "Do you have anything to say to your daughter?" I paused. Yes. I hope she finds a kind woman to learn from. I can't be that woman anymore. Then I walked away, heels clicking like punctuation marks on the end of a long sentence. That night, my lawyer called. "Mrs. Parker, there's talk of restitution negotiations. She may have to repay part of the money." I stared out my window at the moon. "Let her keep it," I said. "I've already been paid, in freedom." But deep down, I knew Act 4 was still waiting, the part where I learned what peace actually feels like. The morning after court, I woke to quiet. No buzzing phone. No emergency texts. Just birds outside and the soft creak of a house that finally belonged to me again. I brewed coffee in silence, real silence, not the kind that waits for guilt to fill it. The first sip tasted like courage cooling on my tongue. A week later, I changed the name on every account. Closed joint cards. Reset passwords. Shredded old statements like they were dead leaves. I kept one envelope, the court order. Not as proof, but as reminder. The header read, "Authority retained by Mrs. Parker." 3 words that felt like a new heartbeat. Neighbors started waving again. Apparently my daughter's stories about me losing it had lost their grip. Margie dropped by with cinnamon rolls. "You look 10 years younger," she said. "I feel 20, I replied. 2 months later, I heard through friends that my daughter's fiancé had left, took the car, the money, the lies. She'd tried to call. I didn't pick up. I wasn't cruel, I was consistent. I wrote her a letter instead. "When you're ready to love without taking, I'll be here. Until then, may life teach you gently what I had to learn the hard way." I never mailed it. Sometimes healing doesn't need delivery confirmation. I signed up for a community art class, something I'd always wanted. The first project was self-portrait in broken glass. When I finished, the teacher said, "It's beautiful, but why the cracks?" I smiled. Because I'm finally whole enough to show them. I even booked a trip to the beach house I once thought I'd lose. The same porch where my husband and I used to plan futures. This time, I sat there alone, wind in my hair, and realized solitude isn't emptiness, it's ownership of peace. I've replayed every dollar, every tear, every yes I should have made a no. People ask if I regret giving so much. I don't. Because giving showed me who I was. Saying no showed me who I could be. Sometimes we're raised to believe love means sacrifice. But real love, the lasting kind, includes boundaries. It says, I'll walk with you, but not carry you forever. My name is Rose Parker. I'm 62 years old, and I've finally learned that self-worth doesn't come from how much you give. It comes from knowing when to stop giving. So tell me, if someone you loved kept taking pieces of you, how many withdrawals would it take before you'd close the account? Think about that. And remember, boundaries aren't walls. They're doors you choose who to let through. She exhales, gentle laugh under the breath. Thank you for listening to my story. If it sounded a little like yours, maybe that's no accident. I'm Auntie Rose, and I'll see you next time.